You know when you get really mad and you just want to punch something? Well, instead of doing that in the real life, let me give you a different outlet that won't involve, breaking something or hurting someone or yourself. Let me introduce to you my Atlas build. Atlas has two passives. His first passive will prevent him from being knocked back as long as he's flat on the ground. Atlas's second passive is called Rumble. When Atlas kills petrified enemies, and his different ones of his abilities will petrify enemies in different ways, they will drop Rumble. Then Atlas can pick them up, giving him some health back. Or if he already has max health, he will increase his armor. As you can see, it creates a little user interface for us above our energy pool, and the armor will slowly decay over time. Simply picking up a new Rumble will restore 50 health or 50 armor, and reset the time and duration. Atlas has a passive augment that will make his first ability, called Landslide, cost 0 energy, do double damage, and travel twice as fast as long as he has over 1400 armor from Rumble. Landslide is Atlas's first ability. Atlas will slide forward, hitting one enemy. Then will also hit enemies in an area all around him. This ability is a pseudo exalted with a 5% critical chance, 5% status chance, and a 2x critical multiplier. But you might be wondering, what is a pseudo exalted? Well, it's simple. A pseudo exalted is a weapon that is an ability like normal exalted weapons, but they don't have their own space to mod in the modding zone. Instead, you have to place mods on your melee in order to affect your pseudo exalted. And only certain mods work on them, just like regular exalted weapons. This means that it is affected by things like combo duration, and it gets a damage buff off combo duration, and is capable of applying status effects and deal critical hits with the right build setup. It does entirely impact damage, so running for a status build is probably not the best idea. In addition to that, this ability also has a separate combo duration. On one hit, the next hit will do double damage. On a second hit, the next hit and every other hit after that will do 4 times damage. Of course, this combo duration does run out. While Atlas is sliding, he is giving iframes, meaning you can simply just spam this ability, especially with his passive augment, and basically be invincible for half the match, while going around one-shotting every enemy. The augment will leave behind a trail of Rumble. Enemies that are walked through it will be petrified for a set duration. These petrified enemies will then, of course, synergize with your passive by giving you that extra Rumble. Atlas's second ability is called Tectonics. Atlas will create a wall in front of him that will block all incoming damage from that single direction. Casting the ability again will make the wall turn into a ball and launch forward, dragging enemies with it. The augment for this ability will have you being able to place 3 walls at once, but you will lose the ability to transform them into a ball and make them roll, dragging enemies. Atlas's third ability is called Petrify. It will petrify enemies in a conal direction in stone, completely immobilizing them, preventing them from moving. Just like all other petrified enemies, these enemies will drop a Rumble when they get killed. The augment for this ability will scan petrified enemies just as if you scanned them with a codex. Rumbler is Atlas's fourth ability. Atlas will summon 2 stone rumblers that will go around attacking enemies. Casting the ability will petrify all enemies in a full 360 around Atlas. When the rumblers die, either by taking enough damage, having the ability run out of duration, or simply recasting the ability, they will drop Rumble that you can then pick up. The first augment for this ability will grant you Overguard when you cast Rumbler, scaling off your health by 3. So if your health is 700, you will gain 2100 overguard. The second augment for this ability will have you only cast one Rumbler that will be twice as strong instead of casting the two separate Rumblers. The augment that we will be using for this build will be Nourish for a few different reasons. Nourish will give us an energy income multiplier, which will be very important through the beginning phases of our mission when we're still getting up our rumble stacks. But once we reach above that 1400 rumble, it will stop being useful as our first ability, which will be our main source of DPS for this build, will no longer cost any energy. The second reason why we are using Nourish is for the extra viral damage, which will then go to our Pseudo Exalted. It will give that extra viral damage to our melee weapon, which the Pseudo Exalted will inherit. So the Pseudo Exalted will start to do viral damage. For Archon Shards with this build, we are just using one Amber Archon Shard for maximum energy is filled on spawn. This is not something you have to use. This is purely the way I like to play the game. I don't like to have to get into a mission and place an energy pad each time. Adding one Amber Shard with maximum energy filled on spawn makes it so I can set up all my damage rotations without needing to pop an energy pad. If you don't mind popping an energy pad, then this is completely unnecessary and you could run an Archon free build. Or, alternatively, you could run a full Violet Archon Shards, which will give you increased critical damage to your melee, giving you 75%, it's a bug, it says 50%, but currently it's at 75%, as long as you have a energy above, I believe, 500, which you can see this build does. So that's going to make you do insane damage. So I would recommend filling these extra 4 slots with Violet Archon Shards, and if you don't think you'll need this Amber Archon Shard, then place a Violet Archon Shard there as well. Ceramic Dagger is our stat stick because it fixed Atlas's main issue, that being that his Pseudo Exalted only has a 5% crit chance. The Ceramic Dagger Final Evolution, which does affect Pseudo Exalteds, will give the weapon a flat 30% critical chance. This means that the weapon, the Pseudo Exalted, will go from a 5% crit chance to a 35% crit chance, allowing us to get easy red crits. And with a 2 times critical multiplier, which isn't amazing, but still pretty good, especially compared to another Pseudo Exalted that's in the game. Not gonna say who though. So let's actually look at the Pseudo Exalted build. So to understand Pseudo Exalted a bit better, recognize that you are not actually modding this weapon, the stat stick. You're modding the Pseudo Exalted. So all the stats here do not matter, and they do not affect your Pseudo Exalted in any way. Only these 8 mods and this Melee Arcane affect the Pseudo Exalted. The stance mod does not matter. Certain mods also don't affect Pseudo Exalted, such as faction mods, range mods, or attack speed mods. The only way to get a faction damage would be by using Raw. The only way to get range comes from ability range, and attack speed comes from casting speed. So this build is very simple and a pretty stock standard Pseudo Exalted build. We have Primed Pressure Point and Spoiled Strike. Normally I would encourage you not to use these 2 mods together because they are additive damage, but Pseudo Exalteds work differently and this is actually a pretty good setup for it. Then we have Sack Steel, Blood Rush, and Gladiator Might, all for the critical chance. Sack Steel at rank 8, yes it's not maxed rank, it will give us 180% crit chance. Blood Rush at 12 times combo will give us on top of that an extra 480% crit chance. And Gladiator Might at 12 times combo will give us an extra 120% crit chance. Do max out Sacrificial Steel. I have not because I do not have the Endo. Gladiator Might and Organ Shatter are for critical damage, and then we have Molten Impact and Shocking Touch. This is so we can mod for Radiation. Radiation damage is very good against alloy armor, it's very good against the Indifference Facade, it's very good against robotics. It is becoming increasingly good, especially with this new update. Furthermore, we don't need a mod for corrosive because we will be using melee exposure, which on ability cast will give us corrosive damage, stacking up to 240%. The amazing thing about this arcane is you don't need to rank it up, as you will get that 240% regardless of if you have an unranked or a max rank melee exposure. The only difference is how fast it will rank up. With an unranked, you'll need to cast it 24 times. With a max rank, you only need to cast it 4 times. But since this is an ability DPS build, we will be casting our abilities a lot, because that's how we're doing damage. And you can see that melee exposure gets up really fast. I already have max stacks. Melee corrosive damage is really good because it's like radiation damage but for ferrite armor, which is the most common armor type in the game. And not only do radiation and corrosive gain extra damage against enemies with ferrite armor or alloy armor, but they will also ignore 25% of that enemy's armor value. And these are 2 very good raw damage types. Viral, which we will be getting from Nourish, is also very good, especially against Corpus and Grineer factions, as Viral will give you a damage buff against the Clone Flesh health type for Grineer, and the Flesh Clone type health type for Corpus. Now let's take a look at our Atlas build. We have Steel Charger in the Aura slot. This is going to give us additional melee damage. Landslide is a melee weapon. It is a pseudo-exalted, it is counted as a weapon, so it will be getting the extra melee damage from Steel Charge. Then we have Stretch. This build doesn't need that much range, but your first, third, and fourth will all benefit from range, so it's definitely good to have. Duration isn't that big of a deal because your fourth and Nourish are the only 2 abilities that you'll have up that long. And as you can see, your fourth already has really good duration. Nourish doesn't have the best durations, but even with 130%, you're still hitting that 32% duration, which is a pretty good margin. So that's why we can run Transient Fortitude for ability strength to get rid of some duration, and then of course we're running Prime Continuity to balance that out. Umbral Intensifier for some more ability strength, giving out that 194 ability strength. Ability strength is very important as it will buff both Nourish, which will buff our damage output, and also our energy income, and like all pseudo-exalteds, it will increase the damage of Landslide. Landslide runs scales of both ability strength and then scales multiplicatively from ability strength off base damage, just like every other pseudo-exalted in the game. Next we have Primed Flow. We do want a lot of energy for this build. You could get rid of this mod here and then put 2 blue Archon shards for energy max, but you wouldn't be able to run violet shards anymore, and you would be taking up other slots of Archon shards where you could be running something better, like violet shards. Rumble Heap is his passive augment. This will make it so our ability won't cost any energy as long as we have 1,400 Rumble. It will make it do 2 times more damage, and it will make it cast faster. Path of Statues is the augment for Atlas's First, which will petrify enemies that walk past in the path that it leaves behind for 12 seconds. This is very useful as it means once we get our Rumble stacks up, we don't really need to recast Petrify ever again, and simply just using our first DPS will stop it from... will make new petrified enemies and rebuild our Rumble stacks. First of all, it makes a very, very powerful combo. You end up with a Warframe that is petrifying enemies, completely immobilizing them, stopping them from attacking or moving, giving itself iframes, doing crazy damage that's enough to one-shot acolytes, immune while on the floor, passive healing, and increased armor with just his passive and his first ability. Really, Atlas only needs his first ability and his passive. The other abilities are just kind of supportive abilities. We will be casting our 4th whenever we can, but it's just an extra crowd control that isn't necessary. But it's kind of just there, so we're going to cast it anyway. Then we have Archon Energize. This is important for energy pickups, especially during the first phase. Once we get our Rumble up, it won't really matter anymore because our main DPS won't cost any energy. But you do want to be able to get to that point where you can comfortably sit at 1,400 plus Rumble. Archon Energize will help with that. Arcane Blessing is extremely important as this is a health tank build. We will be using the 1,500 armor we get from Atlas's passive, plus the adaptation to give us damage reduction on our health, as armor only works on health. You can see I have not modded for health anywhere in this build, and Atlas's base health is only 650. So we will be using Arcane Blessing to increase that health up to 1,200. Or at a rank 3 one, we won't be getting 1,200, we'll only be getting 800 health. But that's still a lot of extra health, but I do strongly recommend upgrading Arcane Blessing. I've just been lazy. Next, we have our companion build. We will be using the Panzer Volpifiler because of the Viral Quills effect. Viral Quills will be spreading viral to enemies in the area, which will mean they take more damage to their health, which again will increase our DPS. Nourish will also be doing this when we get hit, again increasing our DPS. But most importantly, Viral Quills will act as a hit for Synth Deconstruct and Tandem Bond. Let me explain Synth Deconstruct first. Enemies that are injured by the companion will have an increased chance to drop health orbs. This is very good for this build as it will synergize with Arcane Blessing, as it will allow us to get our health orb stacks high quickly on to give us that max health to appropriately health tank. Tandem Bond will give us combo counter whenever our companion melee hits an enemy. And yes, Viral Quills will count as a melee hit, meaning we're going to be getting a lot of combo counter from our companion without even needing to hit an enemy. Swipe will also have the enemy hit additional 4 times, which will increase Tandem Bomb's combo counter increase even more. Panzer Dissolution is basically just there to decrease the time it takes for the Panzer to revive, as most companions will take 60 seconds, where with Panzer Dissolution, the Panzer Volpifiler will only be taking 30 seconds. What's more, it will, while in its down state, still be useful as it will help to spread more viral procs. Tenacious Bond plus Bite will give us a 1.2 critical final damage multiplier, which will buff our critical damage even higher. This only works, of course, if our companion has 50% or more critical chance, which is what Bite is for. Pack Leader will heal our companion and then exceed that healing into Overguard whenever we melee hit an enemy. Landslide is a melee weapon, so it will proc Pack Leader. Linked Vitality is for extra survivability, and Fetch is a must-have. If you do not have Fetch or Vacuum, you are not using the companion right. Finally, we have the Epitaph and the Kuvazar. These are both just utility weapons and they really don't matter what the build is. We won't actually be priming with the Epitaph unless you run into, say, an Acolyte and they're kind of annoying and you want to slow them down, in which case you can fire off a few Epitaph shots to slow them down with its Force Cold proc. But do make sure you are running both primary dexterity and secondary dexterity, as they will increase your combo duration, making it easier to keep up your combo duration so it doesn't run out on you. Even better for that is the Nemeron Focus Skill, which is the focus skill we'll be using because of this Power Strike passive. Instead of our melee combo counter going straight to 0 when the duration runs out, it will only decay it by 5, meaning even if the combo duration runs out, we won't lose all of our combo count. Well, that's the end of this build demo today. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. So, if you did enjoy or learn something from this video, please consider giving me a subscribe and a like so I can continue to make these videos and reach newer people. Until then, bye bye!